What's up? So today we're going to be talking about fragrance oils, or FOs as you may have heard them referred to. Basically, long story short is just avoid these, don't buy them. But if you want to know why, watch the video and you're going to find out. So the first time most people come across fragrance oils is when you're looking online and you're looking at which ingredients you could buy. And you've got maybe some naturals like some essential oils, and then you're looking to kind of fill out the other smells that you can't buy natural of. So for example, apple or raspberry. And then you come across these things called fragrance oils. And these things are super cheap. They're normally like £2 or £3 a bottle, and they've got almost any smell you could imagine. You get things like candy floss, sea spray, rainforest. So it looks pretty good, it looks pretty nice, right? So you think, hey, I'm gonna just go buy a load of these, and then I'm gonna be able to make the perfumes that I want. So anything that's natural, I just use a natural, and then anything else, I'll just buy the fragrance oil and I'll start mixing it together. So this is pretty much what I first thought when I was starting perfumery, which was I think in 2014. And there especially wasn't very much information at the time online. There wasn't much really to tell me, hey, fragrance oils are a bad idea. But I think even nowadays, it's very unclear if you're a beginner that you shouldn't be buying these things. So I'm going to explain basically what they are roughly and why you shouldn't buy them. So when I was a beginner and I was making my very first perfumes, I would basically have these cheap essential oils and these cheap fragrance oils. So effectively, I'd never really touched any proper quality materials that you should be using in perfumery. So at the time, I didn't really know what I was doing. But I assumed that I've got these fragrance oils and I've got the essential oils, which means I pretty much got all the smells there. What I didn't realize were all of these things I had were this kind of basement tier. And effectively, what real perfumers would be working with is none of this stuff that I had whatsoever. It was stuff kind of like way up here, like high quality naturals and pre-made bases, maybe, and aroma chemicals, that kind of thing. But no fragrance oils, no cheap, low quality random naturals. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but fragrance oils aren't really made for perfumery as much as it sounds like it. They are often used by people who are making things like homemade soaps or candles, or just fragrancing their house. And if you're using it in a commercial product, it's not usually that the perfume is the kind of special selling point of the product. You don't normally put a fragrance oil into something because you want it to smell amazing. So it's a trade-off between something that's very low cost and takes no effort to do, and if you put it in, it can instantly make a product that smells bad or smells of nothing smell pretty decent. But the problem is that's kind of like the skill cap as such of fragrance oils. They're not going to they can't do much more. You can't make actual nice high quality perfumes with them. So the reason for this is because they're directed at this mass consumer market. They're not directed at perfumers at all, because perfumery is such a small market because not many people do perfumery, but there are a lot of people making soaps and scenting their home fragrance and doing all these other random uses you'll have with the fragrance oils. So because it just wants to appeal to this general audience, the fragrance oils are as cheap as possible for something that smells kind of like fine. And they don't even always smell fine. So what they do is they put in lots of kind of cheap aroma chemicals to bulk it out, and they just put in a lot of filler oils. So it kind of makes the liquid a bit more, it seems like you got more than you have in a sense. So all of these filler materials really start to cause some issues when you're trying to make a perfume. One of the things is, because there's a lot of filler material and not so much actual aroma chemicals, that means to get the same level of impact with your perfume, you're gonna have to put a lot more in. Say your fragrance oil has got a lot of filler in and some aroma chemicals. That means to get the same level of impact in a perfume, you're going to have to use quite a large amount of this fragrance oil. So at this point, there's going to be so much filler oil, which is not really contributing to the scent, that it's going to leave all this sticky residue on your skin for no reason. Another thing is, sometimes there aren't necessarily filler chemicals, but they'll just be kind of cheap aroma chemicals, which give padding, something like cheap musks, for example, which back up the scent. Now, on its own, for a fragrance oil, if this is in like a soap or something, these can work with that kind of fragrance oil composition. But more often than not, these are going to be things that are going to be bad when combining with anything else in your perfume blend. So if you've got all these cheap quality musks that make your perfume smell like cheap musks just by having added that fragrance oil, then it's going to be hard to get away from your whole perfume smelling like cheap musks without removing the whole fragrance oil. So at this point you kind of think, well, wouldn't it be better if we just didn't have the fragrance oils in the first place? So this really happened to me when I made my second perfume, which is called Moonlight Harvest. And essentially what happened to me was, because I just started my perfumery business, so I thought I need to have some products to sell, I needed to get some perfume together quite quickly. So I went back to one of my old formulas back from right when I was beginning, because it was the favorite kind of formula that I made in the past. But unfortunately it had two of these fragrance oils in. So going back to that old formula kind of years and years later, after having smelled a lot more things and having a better idea of what was actually going on, having started learning my materials properly, I picked up straight away that there were these strange off smells in these fragrance oils and these strange kind of cheap soapy smells which were kind of tied in that you don't necessarily notice straight away, especially as a beginner when your nose isn't trained. And I realized straight away that these fragrance oils, if they're in this perfume, it's never going to smell good. So the first thing that I had to do in order to start building up that perfume was to make my own accords to replace the fragrance oils and to kind of surpass them a bit, which when I did so was really, really rewarding. So long story short here, in my experience, fragrance oils are bad use. Anything labeled as a fragrance oil is something to be avoided. And I really think it's important if you're a beginner to realize this, because you're going to waste a lot of money. And if you actually try to learn these materials as if they were proper ingredients, you'll also waste a lot of time on it. So the point here is, even though it's tempting to go and buy all of these cheap fragrance oils, say they're £3 each, you can get 5 of these for £15. That sounds like a great deal. The reality is they're pretty much going to be unusable when you get anywhere past 1 or 2 months into your perfumery training, and all you're really going to learn at those 2 months is that fragrance oils are something that you don't want to be using. What I would do instead is spend that same £15 on one high quality base, which is what you're really looking for when you're looking for a fragrance oil. So then what's a base? Okay, a base is effectively an accord made by someone else. But the difference between a base and a fragrance oil is bases are actually aimed at perfumery. So I did a video a while back where I looked at 2 bases. So here, for example, I've got Jasmine 4 252925 and Black Agar Jivco 215. Both of these are made by proper fragrance companies, and a lot of time and development has gone into these bases, and these are actually used by real perfumers to make perfumes. They are, of course, much more expensive. Now, bases aren't perfect. There's still some issues with them. So firstly, not all bases are amazing. It's still something you have to try them and find out if they work for you. And the other problem with bases is that sometimes they can be discontinued. So for example, maybe you buy a rose base and then the company stops making that rose base because you have no idea what's in it. Then you're not going to be able to use that in your perfume anymore, which could be pretty bad. That said, fragrance oils have this problem, but much worse, because with fragrance oils, you've got so many more random companies selling them that pop up and close down all the time. Sometimes even with fragrance oils, the same fragrance oil from the same company seems to change over time quite dramatically, which is really strange. But this is just kind of a drawback of using any pre-made stuff in general, right? So ideally you'd want to use your own accord. That said, there are sometimes situations when bases can be useful. For example, say you've got a perfume that you're about to release and it's almost finished, you just need one more kind of element, and you're looking for, say, a rose, for example, you don't have any natural rose. Well, you could go buy a rose base, especially if you don't have a rose accord already made up, and you kind of drop that in there in place of a rose accord, which might take you a few months to actually work out on your own. So when you're buying bases, what you effectively want to do is look out for some particular companies, kind of well-respected names, because if you buy from these companies, which are effectively some actual proper fragrance and flavor companies, not just little pop-ups from people making this stuff at home. So the names you want to look out for are IFF, Givaudan, Firmenich, Simrise, Tscago, Robertet, De Monchy, Albert Vieille, Capua, Perrin Bertrand. I can't think of any more. but there are probably other companies as well. So these companies are actual fragrance companies. They're actually making millions in profit. They actually sell these bases to real perfumers who are making perfumes. They actually put people working on these bases and spend a lot of time and money developing them to make sure they smell good. And they still end up a lot more expensive than the fragrance oils that you're buying. So you've got to kind of think about it, right? If a fragrance oil is only costing £3 per bottle, most of that is going to be profit and the cost of the oils and the logistics and everything that went inside it. So the amount of time and money spent on the R&D for that fragrance oil is going to be almost zero. Okay, and the amount of money that's actually on the oils going into it is also pretty damn low. So really, you've got a pretty low quality product. Now, with a nice high quality base from a respected company, you've got to think they may have a chemistry lab where they've got people doing that analysis of the thing. So say in the case of a rose, they're going to go and do a chemical analysis of the constituents of the rose, and then they're going to have technical perfumers who are going to go and try to build up the most accurate representation of the rose from that. And then if something's costing more, they're still going to put it in the base and just charge more for the base. So it's going to be more expensive, right? But you're getting a base that actually smells quite good at the end. And this is what you've got to realize. So it's not to say that by paying more, you get a higher quality thing, because you can still market cheap fragrance oils as expensive fragrance oils. But if you know you're going to a respected kind of reseller or a respected manufacturer of bases, then you can get these kind of pre-made accords and you can be pretty sure they're going to be high quality, as opposed to just buying from random fragrance oil websites. So this is one of the reasons that I like Pearl Wall, because they don't sell any cheap fragrance oils at all. They just sell bases. They make their own bases, which I'm not the biggest fan of, though some of them could be pretty decent. But they also resell a lot of these bases by like these big respected brands. So what I would recommend is, if you're unsure of like what's a good base, what's a fragrance oil, then if you make sure you go to a respected reseller, then you're definitely going to find that if you buy something, you're probably going to be fine. That said, if in doubt, if you see the words fragrance oil anywhere, just stay away from it. If the website looks like it's more aimed at aromatherapy or candle making or home fragrance, stay away from it. Make sure you're buying from a site that's focused on actual perfumery, because these are the websites selling these kind of bases. Because think about it, if you're making a cheap soap, you just want to buy a cheap fragrance oil, right? Because you want to make profit on your soap. So you're not going to want to buy a high quality perfumery base when it's not going to make that much difference, because it's not the main part of the product, right? If you're making a perfume, or say you're doing really nice soap perfumery where you make the special brand of soap where the perfume is the major selling point, then you're not going to want to be using these cheap fragrance oils anymore. You're going to want to be using, okay, mostly your own accords and aroma chemicals, but if you have to use a base, then you're going to at least want to be using like a high quality base from a respected manufacturer. Anyway, I think this video was just kind of me rambling on a bit, but hopefully you get the gist. Don't buy fragrance oils, make your own accords, but if not, then buy bases from a respected fragrance manufacturer. Really what I'm hoping here is that you just don't fall into the same trap as me, because I bought all of these fragrance oils. Actually, to be honest, it's not too many, but it's still quite a few, right? So this is probably wasted like £40 or something, I don't know. But basically everything in here is completely unusable. So if you go and do the same thing, you're just going to be throwing the money away. So I just basically hope that you guys don't kind of make the same mistake. Yeah, so anyway, that's it pretty much from me. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought, and yeah, man, enjoy your week. One more thing, one of my friends has made some music and I used it as some of the background music for this video, so I'm going to put a link in the description if you're interested in checking that out. Apart from that, feel free to give the video a like if you liked it, dislike if you didn't like it, and yeah, thanks for watching guys. See you soon.